sure I'm labeled conservative. It's a nice way of galvanizing action to dismiss your arguments. So that's the
without actually dealing with the argument.
without dealing with the arguments. So that's extremely common. I have a student who's working on a thesis on polemics in South Indian town right now. And he's collecting, how they used to do debates and all the kind of horrible things that were being said and how they would get rid of each other's arguments. And sometimes it's by calling names. And so there were criteria. In fact, they used to hold the debates, not in a university, but the court. The king would hold debating sessions, and people from different religions, and the materialists were also a viewpoint that was brought in, and they would have to argue their position, and they'd have an umpire who would say, that's not a fair argument, or that's an ad hominem, you can't use that. And then the king would declare a victor. Sometimes changed from week to week, probably. But it was a good method. Instead of having things harbored, secretly and fester, it's much better to address the issues and address them in a climate of open discussion.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I want to add there is that, which I also forgot from before, is that, we think of dialogue as part of a continuum. At one end of the continuum is overt hostility. At the other end is explicit harmony. But toward the middle, on one end you have debate, in which the purpose of the interaction is for one side to win over the other, to conquer the other. And then closer to the other side is what we call debate, or dialogue, in which the purpose is not to win over the other, but rather for both to be heard. And so we're hoping that this method that we call dialogue will lead in the direction of reconciliation. Because after all, I think, I think of justice not as simply a legal term. I think of justice, I guess, in the biblical sense, or I'm sure there are parallels in Eastern culture, that justice involves reconciliation. It does not involve festering resentment. To have true justice needs to be that a solution can be found that everybody can accept.
Okay, so when I went to small Q&A, we should have someone who's supposed to be dealing with that mic over there. Okay, there we go. There are a few basic rules. We're going to do questions in sets of 3. So 3 people will ask questions, and then we'll be answered at once. Questions have a time limit of 45 seconds. You run over that, you will be cut off. Just basically, we only have a limited amount of time, and we want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak if they're interested. If by the time 45 seconds is up, you haven't asked a question, you may not get an answer. So we have a bit of a warning for that. And once you've asked your question, you come back to see so we don't have too much clutter up there. We don't want a whole bunch of people crowded around the mic. It just makes life a little difficult. So, okay, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Can you mention a few things how feminism hurts women? Can you name a few things that is very painful for women as a product of feminism?
Well, if a form of feminism alienates women from men, mothers from their sons, doesn't give women the skills to bring up sons with a healthy identity and all the things we were talking about, that's one way that one form of feminism can hurt women and affect their lives.
Can you summarize it in one sentence?
No, I can't. I'm sorry. Maybe it's because I'm a little tired at the end of a stressful week.
It's definitely been a long evening. It's been rather busy. Okay.
First, I want to thank you both for holding this talk and for your great work, and Cafe for organizing it and the face of such frontal opposition. My question is for Dominic. You've mentioned that women have power, and I think that's just too easily dismissed by the amount of men in high power positions. And I'd like you to elaborate further on hard power and soft power, and perhaps things like FAO in the U.S. and government ministries. The status of women in Canada are good examples of women's soft power, and even men's reactions to women's pain and suffering versus men's pain and suffering.
So are you challenging the idea that women...
I'd just like you to elaborate on women's power, because I don't think you covered it well enough.
Okay, first of all, in a democracy, we vote. And women are the majority of the population. So women have powers through the vote. They can develop more power if they want through better organization, but that is certainly a very definite arena of female power in any democracy. Women certainly have power in universities now. If you look across the country, how many presidents, principals of universities have been women or are women or may become women. So they're very much prominent in that in many different kinds of academic organizations. Women have power now because there are many, many women lawyers who are trained with all the legal skills that they can take to court to argue cases, to change laws. Now, usually the rebuttal to this kind of statement is, but how many female prime ministers have we had? Look at the CEOs. So there are certainly some positions where the numbers of women are not equal to men, members of parliament, and so we can do those statistical counts. And certainly, as more and more women get educated, we see those statistics change. If you look at women my age, then of course all of us were educated. And that skews a lot of the statistics because we didn't have I can't speak for myself here, but many women didn't have the jobs, the training, the incomes. Now they don't have the pensions, and some of them have become a vulnerable group. But if you look at the pool of women who apply for jobs in a younger age group, where the jobs are available, downturn or not, then you see that there are more and more women in those groups. And if you look at different departments, I can only take my own university, you can see that there's been enormous affirmative action through the university, and some large areas are dominated by women. If you look at law schools, you look at medical schools, the numbers of women lawyers and physicians are going up and up. So it's a bit of a danger to take just the veneer at the top and make the argument of women's power on that basis. I think you have to do a much more complicated statistical profile on that. But we could also say that women have often had enormous power in the home. So power isn't always power in public space. Through history, there's been power in the home. When I, again, go back to my studies of India, you look at those extremely powerful women in extended Indian families. They were the managers of those large extended families. The men worked and brought the food, the resources, and the women managed it and made the decisions. So there are different kinds of power, and there are changes in power, increasing female power in some areas. But at the end of the line, or at the end of the day, women will decide whether they want to work full-time or part-time, and work part-time for the sake of their children. And that will skew the statistics. Now, I would say this is a freedom of choice. If the